Okay, so even in Texas, okay, the immigrant population has put some serious dents in the Republican Party majorities in places like Harris, Dallas, and Fort Worth. Same is true in Florida. You know, Broward County and Dade County were maybe not Republican strongholds 30 and 40 years ago, but they would go Republican at least marginally a good part of the time, and they're pretty safely Democratic at this point. So these were the actual estimates calculated by fairly standard statistical procedures used in social science. A 1 point increase in the percentage of immigrants dropped the Republican percentage of the vote by about 0.6% from 1980 through to 2008. And so a typical decline has been, in these larger counties, has been about a 6 or 7 point drop. So, you know, if you take a county that was competitive around 1980, all right, maybe, you know, Tarrant or Dallas, for instance, or Broward in Florida, okay, it's running around 43 now, okay, so that's the magnitude of change that we're talking about. And the same is true when we look at all U.S. counties. We don't have to confine our analysis just to the very largest counties. Some of you live in medium-sized counties and small counties. Well, the impact hasn't been as dramatic because the immigrant flow hasn't been as voluminous into those locations, but it's still been negative. Again, typically you see 2 to 3 points in some of the smaller and mid-sized counties around the country. Texas, again, you know, is often thought to be an exception to this notion that Democrats own the Hispanic or Latino population. And yet, once again, we see that in larger counties there, the Republicans aren't competing as well as they used to. And the same with Florida. I think the question that is on a lot of people's minds is, okay, we've got these facts, okay, and Democrats and Republicans, you know, Judas and Teixeira, as well as many Republican analysts, agree that, you know, the immigrant population has contributed to the erosion of Republican prospects. I think the question is, well, what should the Republicans do, right? What should the Republicans do? And I think that really very much depends on, you know, the theory that you have of people's party attachments and their political behavior. The Washington view, and I've spelled this out in some of the previous backgrounders, not so much the present one. The Washington view is that, you know, party attachment or political party commitment is this whimsical thing, that it's subject to easy campaign manipulation, and that voters are attentive and highly issue-oriented and calculate the costs and benefits and so forth, and that therefore, if you just say the right things as a party or as a politician on the campaign stump, people will come flooding over to your side. Okay, well, I don't think that that's really consistent with, you know, 50 years of survey research on the voting population conducted by academic social scientists. All right, this is a sort of self-serving Washington view that consultants might peddle, okay, in order to attract clients. Oh, yeah, we'll send them the pink direct mail piece. That'll attract all the women voters. All right. But this actually is pretty much false to the facts, this view that party attachment is very whimsical. In fact, party attachment is pretty enduring. It's stable. It doesn't waffle very much. It's not easily manipulated. Campaigns are far better at mobilizing people, you know, getting people to turn out, than they are at getting them to switch sides. Okay, or they're not very good actually at campaign persuasion. You know, we still don't know. Political psychologists have been working on it, but we still don't know exactly how persuasion works, okay? Voters are not that highly attentive. They have a very faint idea of issue positions and stands. So the notion that the Republican Party, you know, by altering its platform, is going to attract legions of Latino voters from one election to the next, it's just nonsense. And I think that we learned that it was nonsense during the Bush years, when very little progress was made, in spite of the fact that the Bush administration took very lenient positions with respect to immigration policy. What did the Latino voters do? They stayed with the Democrats. It's because they weren't really paying that much attention, and party ID is the central cue that people use when they go to the voting booth. And again, I don't think voters are detailed cost-benefit calculators either. That's not the view that we get from survey research. The reason for that is that voters have a lot of other things going on in their lives. They're just not paying that much attention most of the time. And of course, elections are pretty intermittent. Okay? Every 4 years, every 2, if you're a reliable voter. All right? They're not like us. I mean, you know, we think about politics all the time. I earn my living doing this, right? Okay, but most voters, it's not on their mind that much. And that's going to be even more true of Latinos and immigrants who are new to the country. So the notion that, you know, by speaking a little Spanish, or again, by altering the campaign platform, you're going to bring all of these people running over to your side, no, that's not going to happen. What about the notion of attracting the independents? Well, the number of true independents survey research tells us is really rather small. Most people lean at least in one direction or the other. Why is that? Because ordinarily there aren't that many independent candidates to vote for on the in the voting booth. Okay, and so when you look at the behavior of people who say they're independent, they actually vote pretty regularly Republican or Democrat most of the time. All right? And independents are also very scarce among immigrant and Latino voters. There just aren't that many to persuade. And in addition, we also know from 40 years of survey research, or 50, that independents are among the least attentive of voters. In other words, they're very hard to reach. Why are they independent? Because they're not sufficiently interested in politics to have developed strong views that would make them a partisan. They're independent because they're not that interested. They're not that knowledgeable. They don't even reliably vote. I'm working right now on a profile of just who the Hispanic Republicans are. Who are the Hispanic Republicans? Because if we know who the Hispanic Republicans are now, that's going to give us a guide, okay, for who the Republicans might attract in the future. All right, and the Hispanic Republican profile, this will be a new CIS report for Mark here in a couple of months, is very interesting. One of the things we learn when we look at things like the Pew Hispanic Center survey is that Latino Republicans often downgrade the importance of the immigration issue. It's not that important to them. Latino Republicans often take stricter views on immigration enforcement. Latino Republicans take dimmer views on the subject of illegal immigration than the Latino Democrats do. Latino Republicans are more likely to be professional in professional occupations. They're more likely to speak English. For instance, when the Pew Hispanic Center conducts its surveys, it asks whether the respondent wants to conduct the survey in Spanish or English. The Republicans more likely say English. They are more likely to live in the southern states and the Midwestern states as opposed to the West, okay, in the Southwest. They're Protestant evangelical. That's a very good predictor of a Latino Republican if they attend a Protestant or an evangelical church. And finally, they tend to have a particular national origin profile as well, Cubans and Colombians numbering among them. So there's no question in conclusion, and I need to wrap up, that high levels of immigration have undermined GOP electoral prospects, but I would go further and say that adopting lenient views on immigration policy is not going to attract those immigrant voters that already have their party attachments formed. All right. Moreover, the independent Latinos are few and not highly attentive to political messaging. So it's unlikely you're going to attract many of those by changing your views in the direction of a lenient or generous immigration policy. I do think that over time, Republicans will attract more Latinos on their traditional positions, the positions that they hold, that they've consistently held, okay? Maybe they're not eventually ever going to secure a majority, okay, but Latinos will come, immigrant voters will come the GOP's way.